Good morning, good noon, good afternoon, good evening. 我的名字是刘丽蓉 （Lily Chang），来自于圣地亚哥。我是圣地亚哥州立大学中华文化中心的主任，也欢迎你们参加圣地亚哥中华历史博物馆的这个项目。I want to wish everyone a very good day, evening. My name is Lily Chang. I am the director of the Chinese Culture Center at San Diego State University. Currently, I also serve as the chair of the board of the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. It gives me tremendous honor and pleasure to welcome you to the Chang Chinese American Experience and Beyond Zoom lecture series. Today's presentation is My China Roots. I want to welcome people to join us from all corners of the world, especially from the United States of America, from Canada, from the Netherlands, from Costa Rica, from Kingston, Jamaica, from Surabaya, Indonesia, from the Netherlands, from Dubai, UAE, from Ireland, and of course from China. So let me introduce our moderator of today's event, Dr. Bob Stein, who is a key member of the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum Board, the chair of the Palomar Rehabilitation Hospital, and a key member of the San Diego American Heart Association. He is, by profession, a cardiologist. Dr. Bob Stein, take it over.
Well, thank you as always, Lily. And the first thing I'm going to do is mention upcoming events at the Chinese Historical Museum, our Chang Chinese American Experience and Beyond, the next two lectures. Next month in September, we're going to have three generations of leadership in San Diego's early Chinatown, which should be a lot of fun, whether you're from San Diego or you're not. It should be a lot of fun tracing basically the history of Chinese Americans in the United States and in California. And it's going to be presented by Didi Huang and Susie Lancastle. And then the following month, we're having a special presentation on a Sunday, October 19th, at 7 p.m. And we're going to have coming from Shanghai, Nianchi Li, who is an executive at the Museum of Jewish Refugees in Shanghai. You may not realize that in World War II, the only country in the world that took in any sizable number of Jewish refugees from Nazi-controlled Europe was China, and they took in 20,000 refugees despite their own hardships. And they're very proud of this and have a museum in Shanghai that I visited. And we're going to have a wonderful presentation on Sunday evening. At this point, I'm going to ask Lily to mention upcoming events at the Chinese Historical Museum.
Yes, we welcome you to downtown San Diego on the corner of 3rd and J. On September 7th, our event will be the Asian Pacific Historic District walking tour. You get to know a lot about our old Chinatown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to mention that we're sponsored, as always, by the Shu Family Trust and the PL Charitable Trust, without whom we couldn't put on this program. And on the next slide, I'm going to mention Carolyn Chin, who is our ambassador from San Diego State University Chinese Cultural Center, who's going to talk about upcoming events there. Carolyn?
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Good morning. I'm Caroline Chen. I'm honored to serve as an ambassador for the Chinese Culture Center at San Diego State University, where I did my graduate work. I'm delighted to join you this morning for the program My China Roots, presented by Madame Ambassador Elena Wachong and Mr. Li Huihan. I can't wait to hear their sharings. Now, the Chinese Culture Center at San Diego State is hosting an ongoing exhibit of the paintings by Professor Yu Chun Ming. And this exhibit will end at the end of September. So time is getting close. Please come and join us. Now, for today's program, there are some logistic rules for this meeting. Number one is after the presentation, if you have a comment or question, you may raise your Zoom hand or type into the chat box. your host will call on you when it's your turn. Now, before the program starts, we will take a group photo. So please turn on your camera before the beginning of the lecture. After we take the group photo, when the lecture begins, please turn both of your camera and your microphone off. So now we will take the group photo. We will have our new young ambassador, Afina, to help us do that. Afina, hand it
Yeah,
over to you.
I'll just give everyone a few seconds to turn on their camera.
I want to say hello to our speaker from Dubai, Chi Hongxiang. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, wow, we got so many participants today. I am so excited. So just give people on the second page a few more seconds to turn on their camera.
A shout out to Claire Xu, our commando. So glad to see you here. Wonderful.
Okay, one last picture. Yeah, I think I got everyone.
All right, back to you, Dr. Bob.
Thank you. And I always like to have a shout out to Dr. Lockwood Young, who is a fellow graduate of Jefferson Medical College, Sidney Kimmel Medical School from Philadelphia. I say hello to him every month. And I want to mention the subtitles, first of all. We have subtitles to translate the English spoken word into Chinese characters, which my Chinese-speaking friends tell me is pretty accurate, unless a English speaker attempts to say something in Chinese, which befuddles the software. And the other thing I want to reiterate what Carolyn said, if you have questions, write them in the chat box and we'll take a look. I'm going to ask our young ambassadors, Kathy and Afina, to keep an eye on the chat box, and I will be asking you at the end, if we have time, about questions. I want to also remind people that this is being brought to you by San Diego State and San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. And now I want to mention Li Huihan, who is the founder and CEO of My China Roots, helping the Chinese diaspora trace ancestry, launched in 2012 after his own roots search. And he himself lives in Paris with his wife and two kids, is a jazz drummer, speaks many languages, was born in Holland of Indonesian parents, but Chinese heritage, and got a law degree from Amsterdam, studied at Columbia University, and has a multinational renewable energy company and is a consultant in the energy field. And as a discussant, we've got Ambassador Elena Wachong from Costa Rica, who graduated Wellesley class of 1966 and is a banker by trade, but is the founder of the Chinese Digital Museum of Costa Rica, offering name-finding services to communities across Latin America. And she works to help the overseas Chinese diaspora reconstruct its immigrant past. And we thought it would be cool to have Ambassador Wachong start briefly and recounting her multi-decade experience in tracing her China roots. She's the third generation Chinese born. She was born in Costa Rica. And we thought that would be interesting. And then we would have Li Huihan talk about 2021 efforts, 2025, 21st century efforts with the internet, doing it in lightning speed. So Ambassador Wachong, why don't we start with you?
Thank you very much, Bob. And also thank you to the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum, as well as the San Diego Cultural Chinese Center, for having me on again. I gave a presentation 3 years ago on how to try to retrace and recover your Chinese family roots, because I do not speak or read Chinese. I never learned it. And even when I was posted in Taiwan, I was unable to figure out the language nor my family tree. So it has taken me 40 years because of the language barrier. And I'm going to tell you a little bit first of background, because not everyone in our group in Costa Rica, for example, none of the diaspora Chinese had any idea that there was a family tree in China. So I would like to start by showing you what it took in my case to find my 3,000-year-old family tree, which I succeeded, but it did take 40 years. And then Huihan will be able to help us to tell you how to do it in a far shorter period of time. Next slide, please. So first, I want to tell you about the family name problem. We in Costa Rica and overseas, we all think our names are the true names. But really, when you are talking about Chinese immigrant descendants, we have a Chinese name written in Chinese. And so this first screen is showing you that I not only have different names which are Romanized, but even in Spanish. And as we become more global, we have several names. So on the left, my first legal name in Costa Rica has 2 first surnames and 2 last names because it's a Spanish habit. So it's called Elena Alicia, and then last names are Wachong Ho. The Wachong is the father's name and Ho is the mother's name. When I went to study in Boston on a scholarship and later worked with Citibank International overseas, I switched to using Elena A. Wachong because otherwise they would be calling me very different potential names. Several years later, I married a native of Colorado, an American citizen, and his name is Todd Storer. So I became Mrs. Todd C. Storer III. You can imagine trying to pronounce that in Costa Rica. So I gave up. I keep my Elena Wachong name. And since I was married when I was posted in Taiwan, I also tried to follow the rules. And I told them my official name was Ambassador Todd C. Storer III. And for a Chinese to pronounce all those R's and words, it became impossible. So I came back to my normal, easier name of Elena Wachong. And of course, in Costa Rica now, since I'm back living at home, my widowed name is Elena Wachong Viuda de Storer. So we have quite a multilingual group audience today and I am very thankful that you're all here because this has truly become a global search. And for searching for your family Chinese roots, it takes the entire community. I will show you what it took in the next few slides. And on the right of the slide is my Chinese name, because I still, of course, cannot read it and do not pronounce it properly. And it sounds something like Huihan Lie, which has nothing to do with Elena Wachong, of course. Next slide, please. So in addition to overcoming the barrier of trans-Romanizing, going from your Romanized name overseas to your Chinese name, we have a whole new set of words that we need to learn. Although your language is the highest barrier, there are many things about China that overseas Chinese did not understand, and I have been learning in the last few years. For example, the social habits of our home province of Canton was never explained to me. Our parents in Costa Rica never talked about their families, what was happening there, how they got here. It simply did not exist. It was either their language limitations or we just had too much to do. So a few different things that it's important to learn when you do your Chinese research is that the Chinese society, at least in Canton, is both patrilineal and patrilocal. The names of the family tree are followed under the male line only. The women go out and marry elsewhere and become a member of the marrying clan, but they do not keep their own name. The other important thing is not only does the men clan live together, they are one clan, one roof, and one town. The family town is really a feudal style administrative organization. It keeps tracks of the census, the taxes, the soldiers that are assigned to the emperor, how land is distributed, what the sizes are, and also the punishments. And I mentioned the punishments by generations because China is very different. In the imperial times, if an individual did something wrong, they did not shoot that individual. They shot all 3 generations of individuals of that clan. So they still function in a clan system. I call it a tribal system so that for me, it's easier to understand. And in addition to that, my entire Costa Rican clan emptied one hometown in China. There is nobody left of our patrilineal lineage in Canton. Another word we need to learn is family shrine, which the West also has in corners which are devoted to family pictures. But in China, it is an organized, it's a more organized way of functioning. It is a clan temple where celebrations take place, where rituals take place, and which records the names and the rules of how that clan should operate and behave. In addition, the family clans are organized in fiefdoms, what I call language and ethnic groups. And I'm going to show you one picture because we happen to be a Hakka family. And I have found that this one picture shows you how different China is. So I'll show you that in a minute. A new vocabulary that I would like to make sure that everybody understands is something called the generational name, which I have found, to my knowledge, exists only in China. This is not something that other societies organize in the same way. You have multiple names, but not exactly generational names. So a generational name is a predetermined sequence of a second name. That is, one generation has a second name, which is called George, and then everyone in that generation, your brothers, siblings, cousins, all have the name George as a second name. So if you meet someone who has your first name, Wachong, George as a generational name, you know that not only is he a clan member, but he is of your generation. And if you find his father, you should be sharing his father's name, and his uncle's name should be the same as yours. So you are cousins in some degree. The other word that we need to learn is something called the family poem. And the family poem consists of 16 generational names. In our case, I understand that there are family poems which have different numbers, but ours happens to have 16 names which have been selected by a previous ancestor. So in this example, for example, the first generation is named George, the second one is named Harry, the third one is named Joe. And so all males of each of those generations will have that, and therefore they know what relationships they are looking at. We'll take questions later because it is a little complicated even for my group in Costa Rica that I have been trying to explain all these new vocabularies to it. It is a little complicated. But finally, we come to the Zupu, which is a very special document. It is a millennial manuscript, which in my case covers 3,000 years of one surname clan. I know we have a member in the audience who has the Zupu of Confucius, and I hope that he will mention that for us. But the Zupu is kind of a group Bible, if you will. It's a manuscript kept by each family clan for generations, and it carries the name of every male member, their families, their locations, and their history, in addition to the regulations of behavior for that group. Next slide, please. So this one is to show you what the Hakka architecture looks like. This is called a Tulu, and on the left we have a group of about 5 or 6 buildings, Each of those buildings is really a military fortress, which houses 200 to 800 members. If you see the first one up front, it's a mushroom with little windows on its foot. Those are 3 stories of windows and 1 door to defend. So it is really a circled fortress with 4 levels. And on the right, you can see the levels. There in the middle, there is another complex building, and that is sort of the common shared recreation, kitchen, dining room, and family temple. But on the rings around it, on the first floor, are the animals, chickens, goats, pigs. On the second, the units are organized and assigned to each nuclear family unit. And on the third, I understand that they keep their grains, food storages, and extra things that they want to save. So China is very different. I'm told that the Americans, when they first looked at the structures from a military point of view, they thought these were nuclear missile underground sites. That's how foreign they are. Next slide, please. So starting with how I started my family search, I was talking to my father shortly, a few years before he died. In 1987, we did this diagram. This is the one of maybe 40 diagrams which we ended up with, as he tried to explain how the relationships among all the members of our clan in Costa Rica, how we were related. And that's because over my childhood, I kept hearing and being introduced to all these people, and he would always say, well, this is a cousin, and that's an uncle, and this is a cousin. And I thought these were just figments of his imagination. I thought it was a nice way to call close friends. But this is not. This is a blood lineage with all the male relatives in it. So this was in 1987. Next slide, please. In 2003, we finally got half of the family grouped together, and we took this picture, which is 150 people on the steps of the Supreme Court of Costa Rica in San Jose on my father's birthday, November 29th. And it shows you we are a scraggly mixed bunch, but it took me 18 years to get from the first conversation to the second. Next slide, please. 2 years later, Uncle Alfredo, who's aged 92, thinking about all these family pictures and things, started to remember that he actually remembered 3 names. And he wrote these 3 in a piece of paper. Of course, I can't read them. I don't know what they are. I had never known that you could write them. So he told me the first bottom one is his first name, his generational name. The second one upstairs is his father's generational name. And the one up top is his grandfather's generational name. Next slide, please. A few years later, my cousin, thinking about all this stuff, tells me, oh, he remembers that Uncle Antonio, before he left to China to go back home to die, left him a little piece of paper in Chinese. And that was 30 years before that. Excuse me. In 2000, he received the paper about 1980. And in 2007, he found it, and he gave me the Chinese names. I have added the phonetic sounds. I think these are in Cantonese. Excuse me, and the generation of each one. So this is the the family poem of my family. Thank you. Next slide, please. In order to understand what those family poems were, I asked a friend who is from Taiwan to type them out. And in each of those squares, you will see that they still have the same names down the aisles here. And my father's generation, 98, is down here, Qing. And mine is up here with our family names in both Spanish and English. So this family poem, I still don't know who these people are, right? I know their names, but it's still not quite clear what they do. So next slide, please. So then I bump into the Zupu. So this is the Lu Millennial Patrilineal Manuscript, which I received from China, from one of the long-lost cousins. It includes 106 generations, covers 3,000 years of our family in 56 pages. Now, this is not exactly my Zupu because I still have not found it. This is the Zupu I picked up from the internet, which has our surnames, so I know they're related, but it is not precisely my Zupu. I still need help on that. And I apologize, I've been having a little bit of a cold here. Next slide, please. So the way I know that this particular Zupu is my family lineage is because on page 39, with the help of Francis Chimot, I found this little square lined in red, and here are the 16 generational names of our family poem, which I had found by other means in Costa Rica. So I know that the manuscript that was sent by some cousin in 2010, I believe, in China, consists of 56 pages written like this, which of course I can't read, but I can see patterns, and therefore this is my family poem within that Zupu, which I am still working on translation. Next slide, please. I finally ended up with this, which is familiar to all of you, how we try to struggle to write down our relationships and the family. This one is 20 generations, excuse me, from generation 86 to 106. It has not only the number of the generation, but the names in Chinese, how it's pronounced in Cantonese, and approximate years in which I think these people lived, just by different things that I have read. So this is where I finally got to. Now, the next one will tell you the story of how to integrate these things. I was having dinner with my niece in Houston, and her husband is Dr. Jimmy Chow, who is from Costa Rica and a second generation Chinese. So Dr. Jimmy Chow studied and graduated from the University of Costa Rica. He has white Costa Rican friends, and one of them is also a chemist. So his friend from Costa Rica moved to work in China, in Hainan, married a Chinese woman from Hainan who came to dinner in Houston. And that one evening, by luck, I had the papers with me, and I asked her, because she seemed like a very highly educated university graduate person, I asked her if she could tell me what one of those little glyphs in my books were. And she looked at it, read one, and said, "Oh, yes, your number 12 ancestor is very famous. His name is Li Xiaobao. No, Liu Xiaobai. I'm sure Lily will correct me." So it turns out that a lot of Chinese history is in videos, and a lot of Chinese written books are on the internet. So today, a lot of them are available, but of course, only of the important kings and queens and generals and military people who were outstanding. Normal people do not show up on internet so simply. This copy from the internet tells you that this Duke Huan of Qi, and this is his link, is our Zupu number 12 from my millennial manuscript, that he lived in 685 to 643 BC. It tells us who his father and who his successor was. It also tells them his spouses, their children, and there's even this wooden engraving. He's supposed to be in the middle, like what, can't quite make it out, but that was an attempt to show historically who he was. So somewhere in our family tree appears this gentleman of Liu Xiaobao. From then on, I traced through the internet all the ancestors to Liu Xiaobao, and I ended up with the next slide, please. So this is Duke Tai of Qi. So he is the founder of the kingdom of Qi. I can't say it for certain, but that's what I am told, and that's what the internet says, and that's pretty close enough for me. So the transcript of his name in Chinese is this figure down here. He has many names, which is also confusing because the Chinese have a childhood name, an adult name, an honorary name, and a lot of titles. So it gets confusing in Chinese too. So here is the territory in the Kingdom of Qi, which supposedly Liu Shang founded. And this is another organization that I want you to learn from. There is a world clan organization for each of our family names. So in the 213 convention in Hangzhou of the Liu Clan World Association, then President Charlie Liu, who is a PhD from Cornell University and lives in Taipei, mentioned to me that they have agreed that this is Liu Shang is our first generation ancestor. He does not show up on my Zupu, by the way. I start with 5 generations down or so. So next slide, please. And to end, this is the letter I received from the director of the Liu Clan World Association just recently, June 2025, which tells me not only that our father was a member of the Liu clan and that manuscript, but also that the World Conference has agreed that Liu Shang is the first generation of the Liu clan genealogy. So, as you can see, this is a very painful way to do family research and very complicated. I'm sorry I took a little longer than needed. But now I want you to, in contrast, see the magic that Huihan can do. And I call him magic because he can take a rabbit out of a hat and avoid all this painful research, rewarding as it might be, and show us how to do it in a more modern and less painful way. So, Huihan, you're yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Wachong, for your very inspiring presentation. I also want to thank the organizers of today, Lily Chung, of course, Bob Stein, and everybody who made today possible. I'm very honored and excited to be with all of you. My name is Huihan. I will tell a little bit more about myself in just a minute, but I think let's start off with an introduction video of My China Roots, which is the company that I set up and represent, and it essentially shows you the impact of the work that we do. So Muting, maybe you can press play.
Feeling in between has felt like a source of identity crisis, feeling pulled between all these parts of myself, and that includes being Chinese.
I had an urge to go back to the village where my father came from, because honestly, we had a very disconnected relationship. He never told anything about his life in China or his life in America.
Given that my family has been in Canada for 100 years now, there's not much information that I'm expecting to still exist here in China. Can we find an ancestral hall? Can we find a family clan book? It's a whole new world, and it's funny, like, I feel like I blend in here more than anywhere else I've ever lived, but at the same time, this feels like one of the most foreign environments that I've been in.
My father left the village and arriving in a foreign place, Boston, in 1932. He was thrilled, but also scared at the same time. I can imagine that. I really now appreciate him so much of the sacrifice.
It's a bit overwhelming. It's really personal, I think, coming out here. My Taikong was the younger brother, and this is his symbolic remains here. So there's no physical remains, but I guess he has a place here. That stillness, that peace, I think we are all seeking at the end of the day.
just feel connected with yourself, like nothing can shake you. That's a healing process. Just seeing the culture of generosity that my relatives have shown me. It's beautiful. It's building community, starting right in your own home.
Thank you, Muting. And it's really stories like those of Ambassador Wachong and the stories that you just saw right now that I'm here with you today, and that I am doing what I'm doing through my China roots, which is helping people feeling more connected with their roots. So maybe a little bit about myself and how I came to start my China roots. I was born and raised in the Netherlands in Europe, and my parents were from Indonesia. They were born in Indonesia, but they moved to the Netherlands when they were still 4 or 5 years old. So I grew up in a very Dutch environment. It was countryside. We lived on a farm, a small village. I was the only Chinese kid in our school, and that was fine in the sense there was never any real friction or even real, I would say, harmful discrimination that I grew up with. But I was always very curious. And of course, I was confronted by my classmates with the fact that I looked different. And I remember, for instance, an afternoon coming home from school, and I was probably 5, 6 years old, elementary school. And I was really upset because a classmate had come up to me and stood in front of me and was really like, well, why are your eyes like this? And I can't see anything if I do my eyes like this, and you look strange, and where are you from? And so making it very clear that I was somebody different. And I came home, I remember, and I was crying, and I went to my mom and I told her what had happened at school. And my mom sat me down, and this really is a very important point in my life where she sat me down on her knee. She looked at me very intently, very seriously, and told me, the next time that somebody says that to you, you tell them that thousands of years ago, when their ancestors were still walking around in bare skins here in Europe, our ancestors back in China were able to read and write. And that really changed my whole perception of essentially being somebody who was alienated, who was made clear that they were from somewhere else. I, for the first time, realized that is not a weakness or something bad. That is, well, it is what it is, but it's definitely not, there's no need for me to feel any less. And that really changed my mindset. And from then on, I became more, I would say, maybe openly curious about our family stories. So how did we end up here in an environment where our family looks different from everybody else? Why are all our stories, because I was very close to my grandfather, and he would tell me a lot of stories about him growing up, but those stories were all about Indonesia. If he was from Indonesia, why do we kept calling ourselves Chinese? We don't speak any Chinese. We never did. Zero. We didn't know anybody in China. My parents had never been to China. So then the question also came up as a young teenager. Well, why do we keep calling ourselves Chinese? What is actually Chinese about us? And it was never really a satisfying, at least in my opinion, a satisfying answer. It was mostly, well, we just are Chinese. And that fascinated me. So issues of identity, issues of Indonesia, China, Holland, what do those countries have in common that or at least over the course of a few generations, people would move from one place to the other. They're all quite far removed from one another. So what's the logic there? So I grew up with this sense of curiosity. On the other hand, I felt that essentially going just to China, which I did really want, was quite a big step. And maybe in the meantime, Muting, can I ask you to go to the next slide? I always felt embarrassed, essentially, going into a Chinatown Chinese restaurant where Chinese staff would start speaking Chinese to me and I wouldn't be able to speak back. And of course, I would then see the look in their eyes that unmistakably had some sense of disappointment, or at least in my perception, there was some disappointment in their eyes that I couldn't really speak back. So I figured, well, that makes me feel quite bad about myself. So if I just go to China, I will have that times a million, because everybody will be looking at me and expecting me to speak Chinese, which I couldn't. So that made me postpone my trip. I studied in Amsterdam and in New York, and I finished my studies, background in law, and I figured, well, if there's ever a time to go to China and just see what it's like, then now is the time. And that now is about 20 years ago. It was in 2004 when I decided to just go to China and see what it was like. And I gave myself half a year, and I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? If I like it, I'll stay. If I don't, then I'll apply for jobs in Europe or in the US. And long story short, I liked it and I stayed, and I started digging into our family history as I was living in Beijing in that case, and I was working as a consultant. As a hobby, I started digging into our family stories, and I started finding out more and more about where we were from in China. So I started traveling there, and I started finding out why some of our ancestors had left. And every single question that I got answered led to a new question and a new question, and it just sucked me in. It was quite addictive in a way, in a very positive manner, because it also led me to essentially be closer to my family, to my parents, and to understand my grandparents better. And I think importantly, I also started feeling more at ease with my own mixed cultural background, and started seeing my own mixed cultural background as something enriching rather than a weakness or anything negative. So here on this slide, you see a few pictures. So on the left-hand side are the weddings of the previous 4 generations. So top left is my great-grandfather and great-grandmother. They married in Indonesia, in Kediri, in Eastern Java. Then my grandparents, who married in Surabaya. Then my parents in the 60s, Amsterdam, in Holland. And then me and my wife, who married in Beijing. So we met in Beijing and had our 2 young children there, who you see on the bottom right, which is on their first trip to our ancestral village in Fujian. So by that time, I'd already figured out different ancestral villages, so where our ancestors came from. And this was about 200 years ago that ancestors left this particular village in Zhengzhou in Fujian, and they took the boat to Indonesia. And this was a very emotional and special trip, taking my young kids to the place where their great grandparents were from too. And on the top right is my class, essentially, high school. I was 14, 15. As you can see, it's a very Caucasian city, urban environment. So I started looking into my own family history being in China. And I mentioned the positive things that it brought me personally, but also with my family. In addition to that, everybody that I met and shared my findings with, I had very similar reactions every single time. One was, oh, I never thought this would be possible. This being how much I had found. And I kept getting the same reaction of, well, I'm actually quite interested. And now I see this, I want to know what happened to my family history. But I never really started hoping, because I figured, well, it's 6 generations ago that my ancestors left. It's 100 years ago, and natural disasters, cultural revolution. People basically assume very often that it will be too hard, and therefore they never start. And that, for me, was a real waste of energy. Not to mean anything bad about, I know how hard it is, but I just mean in terms of our ancestors and the stories that they went through, the life lessons that they learned, if those are not being transferred, then that is a waste of life and of lessons learned. And in my experience, there are still so many sources and stories that are either in the minds of people or in dusty archives or in attics of people's homes, that if there could only be a platform or an organization or a company whose purpose it is to gather, to collect, and then to connect all those different sources of information. So sources of information being paper trails, documents. So Ambassador Wachong just showed us about six documents that seem to be coming from different relatives. So we all have so many relatives that have their own document, a photo with scribbles on the back, letters, old identification documents, and it's all scattered. And that's just in our family. Then there are archives that actually exist. But for instance, we now work with a lot of libraries who have archives and very valuable collections, but they're just gathering dust because they have not been digitized. And then there are basically a lot of archives that are not known by libraries and are in villages. So the bottom line is that there's a lot of information, but it's very scattered. And that made me that then combining with the fact that there were so many people who seemed to be just giving up hope before having started trying, that felt like a big disconnect and something that I really wanted to change. And that was the origins of my China roots. Also, I think just slightly a quick remark about my grandfather. I was very close to my grandfather, and I was very lucky that he and also my two parents were able to tell me a lot about their stories. But you wouldn't believe the number of people who come to us still to this day who say something along the lines of, my aunt passed away last year, my cousin passed away last year, and he or she was the last one who really knew all about our family history. But now they passed, can you still help us? And of course we can, and we try, but how valuable would it have been if they had this spark of interest a year earlier? And it's that concept of people typically becoming interested, but very often just a tad late, just after they've had their busy lives, of course, making money and paying rent, which is completely understandable. But interest comes, but tragically, I feel very often slightly late. So that concept was another founding notion of my China roots, that I wanted to build a platform that allows people to transfer the stories to the next generation. So next slide, please, because this is essentially how my China roots started in 2012. Now, the problem with people, or for the challenge for people who are interested in finding out more about their Chinese family history, Ambassador Wachong already brilliantly laid out what the problems are. Where do you start, really? So one important element to mention, or one important difference to mention between doing family history research in a country like the US, in San Diego, in the West, let's say, versus China, one difference is that in the West, a lot of archives, record collections, tend to be saved and maintained by central authorities, so church or state government-related institutions. In China, even though you have archives, that is not where the wealth of information is preserved. And in China, the documents that are relevant for family histories are typically still to be found at the clan level. So basically private, it's in private hands. It's not in government or other central authorities' hands. Next slide, please. So that issue leads to, okay, how can you get to where the clan is? And in terms of then what is needed, again, Ambassador Wachong already laid out the challenges, but we do come down to names. So names of ancestors, so especially the last person who left China and who made the trip overseas, and the name of the place where they were born. And it is highly preferable to have those names in Chinese characters, but that is also very often a challenge. And I will give some examples on how our platform basically deals with those challenges of finding the Chinese characters to the names. Next slide, please. So in terms of what My China Roots does, there are three core pillars to the work that we do. One is research, and the research is being done by a team of private detectives that we have based in Guangzhou, so southern China, which is where a lot of the overseas Chinese of today originate from. And another area of the custom research that they do, of the custom service that they do, is to, following the research that they've done, transform that raw research data into stories and narratives, books, if you will, but to contextualize basically the names and the dates and the more factual, the factual history of one's family. We transform that into stories that align the personal stories with the regional stories and the local stories of what happened in a village that they were growing up in, what happened with China, what happened on the other side of the world that made them then leave to that other side of the world. So that contextualization is what we call storytelling and translation services. Now, thirdly, we also do roots trips. So we help families travel to their ancestral villages in China. And we have guides and experts who can design itineraries based on the specific family history of each family. So next slide, please. So this is really the offline custom services. Now, the second solution that we provide is an online solution. So it's an online platform that we have been building. And what that does is it allows people to build family trees. And through the building of those family trees, we will connect them with records that we have in our database. So we have a database of millions and millions of historical digitized records. Over 200 million Chinese ancestors are laid down in those records. And these records are clan books, family history books, census records, immigration passenger lists, Chinatown directories. So it's also records that were drawn up in the place of settlement. So where, be it Costa Rica or be it San Diego or be it Indonesia or Holland. So the overseas settlement destinations, as well as the pre-migration Chinese side of history. So millions of records that we have. And when you, as a user who wants to find more about your family history, you build your family tree. That's all you need to do. You input the names of your family members and we take care of the rest. Our system searches all our historical records and provides those to you. So with this, next slide, please. As I mentioned, so many millions of records, and I'll show a demonstration right now where you can see how you can find the records that have your ancestors' names and your ancestors' stories on them. So if I can now switch to sharing my screen. So I'd like to actually continue where Ambassador Wachong had stopped, and I'd like to take her case as an example for showing you two different ways of getting to her ancestral lineage in China. Now, so let's say you are Ambassador Wachong, and you, for instance, maybe you remember her uncle, I think, had a piece of paper with 3 characters written, stacked on top of each other. And he had told Ambassador Wachong that this was part of a generation poem. These were 3 consecutive generation names. Now let's just start there. Let's just assume that some uncle has given you that piece of paper and it's in Chinese. That's the first challenge that Ambassador Wachong also mentioned. He wrote it down in Chinese. Well, if you don't read Chinese, you still don't really have something to start with. So what our platform offers is a way to upload a document. So I just uploaded the exact document that Ambassador Wachong had showed on her presentation. So I simply uploaded it, and we applied optical character recognition technology, which means that a scanning machine, if you will, extracts the Chinese characters from that piece of paper. Even though it was handwritten, it's still perfectly extracted. And you can then see, first you can see here the digitized characters that are written out here. So, and you can here see what each of these characters, well, how they are transliterated. So the first character in this instance is in Mandarin Pinyin. So this character is pronounced Jia. This character is Zheng. And this last character is Tong. So this tool allows you to make sense of any records, documents that you have in Chinese that you might not know the meaning of. All you need to do is take your phone, take a picture of that document, upload it, and then our tool to extract the character and transliterate the character does the rest. So let's continue now with putting ourselves in Ambassador Wachong's shoes, and we've just gotten this document. And now, at least we know, okay, the first character was Jia, or at least was this character. So I can copy paste this character because I know that I think it was maybe 3 generations before Ambassador Wachong that this character was the generation name of. So I know that many people in her clan, in her Lu clan, had names that started with Jia. So what I do is I copy paste and I go to basically our search system. So and I paste. So this is the search, basically the search engine. I ticked Chinese because I'm going to input. I'm going to copy paste a Chinese character. So here in this red box, I just copy pasted that character, Jia. So that because I know that it's part of some first names of people in Ambassador Wachong's family. Now, secondly, last name is Lu or Li, and I see when I type in the letters, there are automatically characters that are being suggested. So I type in the part of the name, basically, Lu Jia, and already immediately I get results. So these are 73, or at least now I'm seeing a list of 10 results out of the 73 total results of records that have that name, Lu Jia. Now, that's 73 records is a lot of records. You don't want to be searching through all those 70 records, especially if you don't read Chinese. What's the use? You don't even start. So what we have here on the left-hand side of the screen is a filtering system. So for instance, the types of books that the types of records, the categories of records that this name appears in, the publication location of the record that this name appears in, the ancestral places in China for the records that this name appears in. So you can click on any of those options to narrow down the possibly relevant records that contain that part of the name. Now, in Ambassador Wachong's case, there's a very clear clue, and that is Costa Rica. So we can see here from the publication locations that there are many from China. There's one from Costa Rica that has the name Lu Jia. So I click on Costa Rica, and then it shows me our system will show me the one record that is from Costa Rica that has essentially this character. So for instance, here all those here in yellow you can see this is part of a lineage. I'll explain in a second how this is laid out, but you can see, first of all, here highlighted in yellow is that exact same character that Ambassador Wachong's uncle had given to her, Jia. And as I don't read Chinese, for instance, I can hover my cursor over any character. You can see my mouse in the middle. And as you then look at the bottom of the screen, it provides an automatic transliteration and translation. So this character is Xing. So this character is Wen. This character is Feng. So even if you don't read Chinese, don't worry, our system takes care of that. So this is one, I told you there were two ways that I was going to show you how our system helps you find records, and in this case, using Ambassador Wachong's case as an example. Because what I found now is the lineage of Ambassador Wachong's clan. But the second way that I'd like to show you is actually simpler and more direct. And I'll show you right now. The second way is when you start with the name of Ambassador Wachong's father. And there was another slide that she showed, which showed the name of the father in letters, which was Louis Wachong Lie. So you can just fill in that name, even though it's not in Chinese. You just fill in the name that you have. So I typed in the name, the first name, and then the last name, and I click search. So now there are 26 results 26 results of records that contain Louis Wachong Lie, those names, or a certain variation of those names. So the first hit is Louis Wachong. The second, and that's from the source is a Costa Rica directory of Kuomintang party members, but just to so that already looks interesting because it mentions Costa Rica in combination with the name. So we'll definitely click on this on this link. But just to scroll down and show you some of the other records that the system has found. So there's a Louis Lie on a passenger a ship passenger list. There's another Louis Lie from a Vancouver, and this is also a passenger list from United States immigration file. So I can click on any of these records just to see, oh, could this Louis Lie be, well, in this case, Ambassador Wachong's father? Our system has extracted all the important information that is on each of these records, so you can then compare. Okay, was his birthplace from Taishan in China, estimated birth year. So we've already extracted all that information from the record. And if you know that that's true or not, well, then that will help you decide whether or not this record is actually of a Louis Lie that is your father or not. But here, of course, you can also see the picture of the record, Louis Lie, and then you can see essentially he was a merchant from China, etc. You can just essentially yourself do your own private detective work and see if this is the Louis Lie that you're looking for. But as already mentioned, the first link was actually very promising already. So let's just continue with that one. And you click on to see the record. And Louis Wachong from who was essentially appearing in a Costa Rica directory of KMT Nationalist Party members. Now, the big thing here is that there are Chinese characters listed. So I can see here that his first name, it doesn't matter if you don't read Chinese. I mean, I have Jin Shui is basically the Chinese name, but the important thing is that you have Chinese characters for his name. And if you now scroll down, you can do a new search for all the records that have that Chinese version of the name. So I just click again without even knowing how to maybe pronounce this or what it means. It's just I click on the continued search, and now I again get 20, basically too many results. I get 21 results, too many to just scan one by one. So again, I turn to the filtering system on the left-hand side. Again, I see Costa Rica, and I click, and I see a Costa Rican Lu family genealogy table. And this happens to be the same, or this is the same table as the one that we saw just now, 10 minutes ago, through the other way, through the way of the generation poem. But now we found the same book, the same lineage, by simply entering the name of Ambassador Wachong's father. So here you can see the same characters, and they are right here. So Jin Shui. Now, one thing that is really interesting, I find, is that you can see in terms of how it is set up, this is a lineage, right? So this is the father of Ambassador Wachong, this is his father, this is his father, his father, his father, his father. So each of these names is one generation. And you can see, so depending on which ancestor you start off counting from, these are the numbers of those generations. So if you start counting from Lu Shang, so Ambassador Wachong was just mentioning in one of her later slides, there was an ancestor, a common ancestor called Lu Shang. That's just this name. So when you regard him, Lu Shang, as the first ancestor, and you start counting from Lu Shang, then Ambassador Wachong's father is the 98th descendant. And what is interesting here is that there's between brackets, there's another name. And this actually goes to Ambassador Wachong's last name, which, so first of all, as Ambassador Wachong herself mentioned, very often Chinese have different names that they went by. Even Ambassador Wachong went by different names, as she showed on her second or third slide. When she married, she adopted the name of her husband, and different phases in life, she went by different names. Same way, many Chinese went by different names. They went by even more different names. Some were official names, some were nicknames, some were pseudonyms. Different names were there. Now, this means, in brackets, that Ambassador Wachong's father, Louis, also went by this name, Hua Chong. Now, I can very well imagine that Ambassador Wachong's actual name, as is written on the screen, Wachong, actually has its origins in this version of her father's name. I mean, this is just a theory of mine. This is for Ambassador Wachong to confirm. But if it is indeed the case, then I can say this is very common for Chinese immigrants who arrived in a certain place where they had to give their name. Of course, in the Chinese way, you start with the family name, then you say the generation name, and then your personal name. So in this case, Lu Wachong. He would have said it in his local dialect, and he would have mentioned it to a person who I'm guessing spoke Spanish. Basically, whoever the bureaucrat or the official or the assistant was that wrote down, that was responsible for writing down his name. So that person wouldn't have spoken Chinese. So he had a Spanish speaking ear, which means that the name, the Romanized form of Ambassador Wachong's last name, Wachong, is a combination of the accent with which he spoke his name and the ear of the recipient who was responsible for writing it down. So that's how you then get a lot of, even my name, Lie, is Lie. It's a weird spelling, but it's the most common Lee that most people have. So for instance, Bruce Lee is the same Lee as my Lee. It just has an E at the end in my passport because I have a Dutch colonial background through Indonesia, and my ancestors that went there. And in Dutch, if you want something to be pronounced as Lee, you add an E. So that's why my name is spelled like that. So sorry for this detour, but that's I think that's some of the information that you can get out of a document, and then seeing the translation tools, using the translation tools that we've applied. That's how you can make these types of discoveries. Well, finally, Ambassador Wachong, this is you. So this is the Ai Lian, and this is so you are mentioned in this lineage that goes all the goes back actually to the Yellow Emperor 4,700 years ago, but it definitely goes back thousands of years ago. But this is essentially, in a few minutes, I've tried to demonstrate how, with relatively limited information, so a name in Romanized form or parts of a generation poem, you can essentially use our platform to find your full lineage. Now, what can you do? What next? So let's say you found this. You will likely want to preserve the information or somehow make it relatable, translated, and of course you want to share it and preserve it for generations to come. So for that reason, we have our family tree software. So everybody can just build their family tree. It's free, and essentially use the information that, for instance, they found in records that I just showed to build out their own family tree. Now, a couple of quick tools. I think I'm running at the time. I need to be conscious of the time. But a couple of tools I want to show too is that if you have photos, you can upload those to the relevant family member. So, because very often we all, I'm guessing, have family photos that we hold dear, and a lot of those photos, at least in my case, I need to ask aunts or aunties who is on the picture. Like, for instance, a picture like this there are dozens of people on the picture, and I only know two actually because that's that are part of my family. But what I'm showing you is a tool that I can, first of all, share this picture. So through our platform, I can share this picture with anybody that I want through email. So I type in the email, and then I can send it to my aunt, my uncle, my father, my mother, anybody who can tell me more. They can then access this same view, and basically they can fill in people. As you see, I'm hovering my mouse on different who is this, and then linked to a picture. So our system has recognized what is a face, and basically you can now tag a name to a specific face. So for instance, Li Jinghan, oh, sorry, wrong button. As you see, as you see different, you can see on the screen that there are different circles basically that I can name, and different circles around different faces, and I can basically now ask my auntie, oh, who's the second person on the left, who's the third person on the right, and in addition to this, I can request a memory from any relative. I can press this button, share the picture with the family member. I can add questions. What memories do you have of this picture? What happened in what happened in this picture? Or why are you wearing such funny clothes? Or why are you looking so sad? You can ask any question to go along with the picture that you send. Basically, then the next step is for the recipient to share a memory to answer the question you asked of them. And all they need to do is press one link, and then they will be able to record their voice. So just in the same way you would have left a message in an answering machine or a message on WhatsApp, you just click a link, you speak, and then our system will do the rest. So with your spoken voice message, we have now artificial intelligence, AI tools that will transform that spoken story into a written story that you can save onto your tree. And essentially that those stories on your own account, where you can link them to that picture or to people on your family tree, etc. So these are, I think, I might stop here. What you see here, then maybe to finish it off and to circle it back to our custom services, what you see here are reports that we can also help you write after we've done research in your ancestral village. So you see different, we call them stories. So introduction to a village, your ancestral village. We can go to the ancestral house that might still be standing in your ancestral village, and then we take pictures in that house that we then show on our platform, and then we essentially share all of that information with you. So let me stop here, and I'm looking forward to the next phase. I'll hand it over to Bob. Please let me know if you would like any advice or if you have any questions. My email is on the slide deck that is probably going to be shared with you, and I look forward to hearing all your questions.
Well, first of all, Huihan, I have to say my head is spinning and my jaw is dropping. It's amazing what you've done, and Ambassador Wachong, it's amazing what you had to do over 40 years. And for us, if I were Chinese, I'd be taking you up on this in 2 seconds. My own case, my last name's not even Stein, and my dad's mother, her husband, his father, uh, died, and she remarried, and that's how he got his last name. I'm not even sure what his actual last name was at birth. So that's the difference. And we had a question about paper sons, which one of you may answer. Paper sons are the stratagem that Chinese people used to get into the United States during the restrictive period between 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act and the 1965 Immigration Act, when taking advantage of the burning of the records in San Francisco in the earthquake of 1906, people would take the guise of someone, some other family, and they would have a different last name. I think those people are out of luck if they don't know their true ancestry. But at this point, I'm going to call on Lily Cheng, who's going to speak, and she may introduce Youngshan and Grace, who are two people from the United States. Youngshan went to Stanford and Princeton, and Grace went to Northeastern, and they live in Guangdong, China, I think, and they've created this Roots to Bridges organization to create a sense of place for overseas Chinese in China. So why don't we? I'm just absolutely blown away, and this is stimulating me myself to think about my own genealogy if I'm able to. Lily, if you can speak, that'd be
Yes.
very cool.
Yes. Yeah, I am almost speechless like you, Dr. Bob. The work that Ambassador Lu Ailian, Elena Wachong Lu, and the work of Li Weihan, your work stimulated me. I want to know more about my own ancestry, even though I do know something. I want to take this moment because we're dealing with my China roots. And I took time to look for information related to my China roots, and I was able to locate This organization, small but mighty, called From Roots to Bridges. And guess what? We have two young people, one Si Yongjian, who actually grew up mostly in San Diego, and then Yang Jiayong, who grew up mostly in Delaware, who are now living in my mother's ancestral village, Shunde, and they are with us right now. All I want to ask at this point for Si Yongjian and Yang Jiayong is, please give us a couple of minutes of your reactions to the phenomenal work that Ambassador Elena Wachong and Li Weihan, the work that they have done. Make your comments right now, short and sweet. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Lily, for inviting us into this space. And thank you so much, Mr. Li Weihan and Ambassador Elena Wachong, for sharing your inspirational journey about your root finding, stories about your family. I'm sure that we can all relate, as overseas Chinese ourselves, growing up in a place where we're always reminded of our identity and, your journey, your stories inspiring others to seek their roots really inspires us to carry on with our journey from roots to bridges.
So we created From Roots to Bridges because we felt that the root-seeking experience in China is a truly life-changing one. For us, it convinced us to pack up our bags and book a one-way ticket to China. And so now we live here and we're building these group trip experiences for people like us to be able to experience China and reconnect with their heritage. And for those without roots in China, we're also extremely proud to organize authentic, off the beaten path trips around lesser known places in China, all while having fun and building a community. We really are excited about stimulating interest in China across all communities. So please reach out if you're interested in having a chat. We are hosting group trips to Fujian and Guangdong province this year. So we'd be happy to have anybody, regardless of whether you have roots in China, join us.
Thank you so, so much. It is important to think about roots and bridges, but it's even more important to use all the tools we have today to discover where we all come from. And I know that we have some questions. Dr. Bob, can we ask our young ambassador to help out with some questions? Afina?
We certainly can. Either Afina or Kathy, do you notice any questions from the audience? Otherwise, we'll have you folks raise your hand. Folks?
I think we
Afina?
can have people raise their hands
Okay.
through the Zoom feature.
I think I already answered the paper sun question, which is if you really don't know your actual background, you're not going to be able to use these amazing tools.
Can I add to the paper sun question?
Of course.
Because I do want to emphasize that even though it is very hard and makes things a lot more difficult if you don't have the right name, we've had quite a few cases where we were able to figure out their ancestral lineage. My first advice is to turn to tombstones. So a little bit of background. Of course, these immigrant populations needed to take on a different name for legal purposes. That didn't mean that they would forget about their actual biological family or identity. They actually very often held that very dear and true, but just not out in the open, definitely not on public documentation. So even though, whether it's a school record or a census record, yes, you will only have the paper sons or daughters' names. Very often, death being, of course, one of those points in life where you think, well, okay, we need to go back to what really matters. And very often you will find on a tombstone in the US that there's a Chinese name in Chinese characters and a name in letters. And very often, sometimes, let's say often, those do not correspond. And if not, then you will find that in most cases it's because the name in Chinese is the biological name given at birth, whereas the Romanized form is the legal name that they led their life in the US with. So this is an example. My first piece of advice is go to tombstones. Second, we've also had quite a few cases where internally, inside the family, people basically had notes. One instance was a family tree that was essentially drawn up on a piece of paper, which is very simple. So just family written scribbles and documents where then the biological names appear. So even if it's more difficult, definitely do not think, oh, it's just probably not possible because they came in with a different name. Do not give up hope, and let us know what you have. We have free consulting calls, so just schedule a call with us, tell us what you have, and then we can just take you through, give you some advice and take you through the options.
So Huihan, I wanted to just join you in that. In San Diego, we have a huge memorial park for a lot of Chinese Americans who are buried in San Diego. I do my research in with tombstones, and normally with the Chinese characters, they show their name and they show their paper name. Both names are there. And so interestingly, our next talk will be on the mayor of San Diego Chinatown and Akun. Of course, Akun, it is not his real last name. Yeah, but we will see that on his tombstone. So I agree with that. I did see a query about adoptions and so on. If you don't mind, you can comment about how to find roots for adopted children.
Sure. That's a completely a sub part of our research. So we have two researchers specifically working on adoption related research. So we have a very specific way of operating there. So we start with getting the raw data from a DNA database that most all adoptees have done. So this is typically 23andMe or Ancestry DNA. We then put that DNA into Chinese commercial databases. So that's step one. So hope in the best case scenario, we will find second or third cousins that way. Typically we don't, but because that's the first lowest threshold way of, if there is success that way, then you'll only have spent a couple of dollars and then you've achieved success. That's why we start there. The second step is social media posts. So we work with adoptees to have to produce 1 minute videos and also other just graphics for adoption related research posts that we then share on local social media platforms in China. So depending on where the orphanage was that they were adopted from. So, and then as a third step, we have the research team that actually visits orphanages, police stations, finders, foster parents, nurses, former directors, which is really important. So very often when you go to the orphanage right now, orphanages, like any government affiliated institution, has tended to become very risk averse because of the political situation. So if you find retired directors, you'll find they are often a lot more helpful. So, okay, these are just a couple of examples. If you want to see our work in action on adoption, go to Netflix and search for the documentary called Found, because that literally follows our team doing research for 3 adopted Chinese American girls. So on Netflix Found, you see how we do that research.
Yes, so
thank you very much. We're basically at the end, and I think I want to remind everybody about Huihan Lie's email, which is on his in his slides. This is all recorded and able to be read and able to be seen through the San Diego Historical Museum's website. And I also want to mention next month and the month after. Next month, we have the 3 generations of San Diego's Chinatown, where we will show you the tombstone of Ah Quin, and you will see that it's not his actual name is not Ah Quin. And then the month after, we have that special Sunday evening one on the 20,000 European refugees housed by Shanghai during World War II. At this time, I want to say goodbye to everybody